Business Sidekick.
Hello guys, it's Justina, LiveChat content writer. Welcome to Business Sidekick. As you know, Business Sidekick is about growing your online business. So we're talking about strategies helping to get more traffic to your website, be visible in the internet, and stand out from your competition. I've talked with my guests about email marketing, social media strategies, how to make it easy to buy from you. Well, it's time to build your first customer service team. My today's guest is Mat Patterson from HelpScout. Matt has a great experience in building customer support teams as he grew his team from 1 to 26 people. So basically, name a problem and Matt knows how to solve it. Enjoy!
Business Sidekick.
All right, thanks a lot for accepting my invitation. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're doing on a daily basis?
Absolutely. So I am working for HelpScout, but my background here in Australia is actually as a web designer. So I was a web designer for about 8 years in the kind of early 2000s, late 90s era. And it wasn't until 2006 when I switched back to really doing customer service. I joined a small company called Campaign Monitor. It was 4 people at the time to be their first customer service person. And that was a good fit for me because I was had that combination of web design, technical skills, and kind of writing and communication skills.
Wow, how's web designing connected with customer service?
Well, so Campaign Monitor was and is, it's a web application, an email marketing web application, and it focused very much on helping web designers create and send HTML emails. My web design knowledge was super helpful because a lot of the questions were technical and related to email creation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I get it. All right, so the topic of today's episode is we're talking about how to create your first support team. And we're talking to all listeners who already have a business and it's up and running and it's quite successful. So they're starting to think about hiring new people. So as your experience in customer service, here's my question. How to create your first customer service team?
Yeah, that's a big question too.
It is, I know.
So that's something that I did. I was the very first customer service person in that role in my previous company. And I've been thinking about that a lot because this is a question that comes up. But I think the first thing you kind of have to do is step back and figure out, like, what is good customer service to you? So it's going to be different for every company. But what does good customer service look like? You need to kind of define that for yourself and figure out, the type of service that we want to provide is, this. We want to do real hand-holding kind of high-touch customer service, or do we want to do a lot of self-service because we want to scale it without having to add a lot of staff? So you kind of got to figure out what you want to do ultimately to start with, and then you'll think about your values as a company. And, if you value integrity or speed or whatever it is for you, those things will help you figure out at the very high level what kind of people you should be hiring and how many you're going to need and how quickly. So I think that's the baseline. And there might be legal requirements for you as well in certain areas as to, you need people who are qualified in certain ways or who have certain
skills,
licensing and that kind of thing. So there's a few elements there. And then you move on from that. Once you've got that high level understanding, I think you start then figuring out, like, what support channels can we offer? Do we do email? Do we do phone? Do we do live chat? Do we do a combination of all of those? Do we offer social support? When you're starting out, you might have to restrict it just by the nature of being a small team. You probably can't do everything straight away. So you might want to pick which ones to start with.
Yes, exactly. Is there a communication tool that you would suggest to use at the beginning?
I think, and this might be just my personal experience, but I think email is the easiest one to start with because there's a little bit of separation. Live chat, like if you go straight to chat, the demand on your time is so high from the start that it can be really difficult to scale up. But email, you can start with one person who's answering 100 emails a day at the beginning because they might be quite simple. and you can live with that for quite a while, and it scales much more easily in the early days than other channels. So that would be my personal one. And I think social media now, like if I was starting again a team now, social media is probably much more important. And so having some presence there and being able to be responsive on some social channel at least is probably also super important. As you grow up and you have many more customers, phone is difficult because you only have one phone line. You've got to figure out whole new systems. And so that's something you sort of really have to commit to, I think, phone support in the long term. If you want to do it, you want to do it really well. My philosophy was always, if I can't provide really good support on this channel, I'd rather just not offer that channel at all.
Oh, I agree.
And commit to ones that I can do. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. How do you look for people to your team? I mean, was it difficult to find right people? Did you look for any important skills?
Yeah, you know what? I think this is something that we've written about at HelpScout. We've talked about this a lot because I think hiring is so important, getting the right person. But even at the same company, the kind of person that you want very early on is often very different than the person you want to hire later on. So for me, at the start, I tried to hire people who were just like me. So I hired some other people who were web designers by background or who had technical backgrounds like that and who wanted to move into customer service because we needed a bunch of technical skills. We didn't have a lot of documentation. People needed to figure out stuff a lot and they needed to be quite independent. And that really worked early on. But then as you grow, you want to bring in new skills and people who have like real high touch customer service skills, and maybe they don't have the technical backgrounds. And so figuring out, okay, well, the type of person I want now, it might be a little bit different. They might look different than me because I want them to do a slightly different job than what I had to do, 3 years ago. But some things are consistent. I think you want to figure out, like, yes, we need people who have good customer empathy and people who have great communication skills. And maybe the skills that you need to operate LiveChat, especially if you've got a decent amount of volume, those skills might be different than the person who's really good at answering emails or the person who's really good on the phone. So I think understanding what you need them to do at the different stages will help you figure out what kind of people do I need to look for now.
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the problems in customer service area is that people hiring support agents see customer service as just one department, and they don't see the difference between the channels that you already said about. So when you're writing an email, you probably won't write it the way you would respond to a person on Facebook or Twitter, right? So you have to adapt your communication to the channel. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there are people who are temperamentally suited to live chat because it's a little bit more high pressure because the person is waiting for the answer right now, and you might be talking to 2 or 3 people at the same time as well. And so keeping all that in your head, figuring out how to quickly type an answer or to dig into the conversation, it's a very different set of skills.
But our agents talk to 6 or 7 people at one time. That's really funny.
Exactly. So 6 or 7 people, yeah, there's lots of great customer service people who just wouldn't do well in that environment because they prefer to think more deeply or to have more time to kind of dig into technical background or do a lot of investigation. And so the people who are really drawn to that type of work probably are not going to want to do 6 or 7 chats at the same time, and they just feel frustrated or feel like they were overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. But some people are super who love that kind of high intensity, fast moving conversations where it's just talking to lots of people.
Do you have any examples of like people personalities that would fit customer service? For example, introverts are not a good fit for customer service. Would you agree with that?
That's an interesting one. I'm not sure. I think it depends on the channels. I think certainly from my experience, some people who are fairly introverted who are really great at customer service because they're very empathetic and they feel other people's difficulties, and they probably don't want to do phone calls because that's their introversion would make that difficult for them. But being able to read an email, kind of empathize with that person, go away and work by themselves and come back with an answer, they love that kind of thing. So I don't know that it's that clear. The kind of qualities I think that are consistent across the different channels maybe is emotional intelligence, so people who can understand what this other person is feeling and respond appropriately to that, problem-solving skills, communication in writing, communication in reading, people with some level of kind of detail-orientedness. That's not a word.
It is now. Yeah, but it's really difficult to find those skills in those people. Did you have any tricks how to check it?
I got better at this over the years. I think it was quite hard. I eventually started doing some better screening. I think we would ask people to apply to the job and explain why they wanted the job, all the normal things, but also just throw in here's a couple of sample questions of this is the kind of things our customers ask. And I was looking not for them to figure out what the answer was, because I would just tell them, look, the answer is on the website. It's not that hard to find out. What I'm looking for is how you explain this to this person. So you're getting a bit more of a sense of what they'd be like in the actual job.
Oh, that's a very good idea.
So doing that, and I think other people do it differently. I know at Automatic, who make WordPress, they do their whole interview through a chat. So there's no voice contact and there's no face-to-face contact. It's all through a chat conversation, because they're trying to test what is this person like in the medium that they'll be working in. So I think there's different approaches to that. But yeah, you're right. Like an interview it's never as good a test as seeing a person actually do the job.
That's a good idea. Okay, so when we have those agents, probably the most important thing when you have them on board is to train them, right?
Yep. So taking someone from day one and figuring out how do you make them productive and successful in that team.
Yeah. Can you share how much time it took you to train your agents?
So it depends when we're looking at. So early on, I think it took quite a long time. And that was because there was nothing written down. Like I had so much stuff was just in my head, and trying to get that across to someone else who didn't necessarily have the same background as me, it's quite difficult. And so I have a chart somewhere of kind of time to being productive, the number of conversations that a customer service agent could handle or was resolving, in a day or in a week or in a month. And I have one line on that chart, which is before I really invested in proper training, and one line that's afterwards. And you can see a big difference. Once we started implementing our own internal knowledge base and some kind of training courses and a bit more structure to the learning, people became productive much more quickly. So that was a lesson. It took me a while to get to that point and to be able to have the time and capacity to build it out. But once we did, it was super effective.
Whoa, because I had a customer service background, but I worked there for 3 months. I remember that I had a 2-week training, and I was supposed to work in call center, and after that my manager expected me to know everything about all processes, including billing and credit and collection, right? I did not learn much about customer service itself. So when I started to work, I had no idea how to talk to people, For example, someone started to shout at me and I had no idea what to do. So I think that also another very important thing is to, even if someone has a great emotional intelligence, it's important to teach them how to deal with people, especially with the difficult ones.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the thing that what I ended up doing, because I was in Sydney and I was often hiring people who would work in Europe or in North America, and we only had a short amount of time face-to-face with them, so we'd fly them out to Sydney to the office and have a week or a week and a half. And you're right, you can't learn everything in that time. So what I would end up concentrating on is more of what you were just saying, which is you can go back and you can teach yourself the product when you're sitting at home, because we can have training modules on that and you can, through practical experience, you can learn it. But what I wanted to get across to them in that first week and a half is this is how we treat our customers. This is, our attitude. This is how we phrase things and how we talk to customers and how we deal with difficult people. All of those things which are much harder to kind of pick up on your own if you don't have someone sitting there next to you to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I found that was a much more useful use of the first week or so, is really kind of teaching them what is this company and how do we treat people here.
Yeah, and actually I think it's much more important because even if you're speaking on the phone and the agent doesn't know the answer now, but when you hear that they care about your problem and they are nice to you, then it doesn't matter that they don't know what the response is, right?
Yeah, if you're hiring people who are smart, they'll work out the product stuff themselves. Like they'll figure out the answers, and they'll, especially give them access to a knowledge base or to existing, past conversations, or the help desk has all the history. They can go back and find answers. They can do that themselves, but they may not necessarily know, like, in this situation, how would we as a company behave, and what would we do for this customer, and how far are we willing to go for them?
Yeah, exactly.
Those things are what makes customer service, more so than just an answering machine, which you could get a robot to do.
Yes, exactly. That's the point, right? Okay, so maybe the last question, because I love to chat and I would chat longer, but we have limited time. So, okay, the favorite question of all managers. Can you tell me something about the most important customer service metrics?
Yeah, that is a popular question with managers. You're right. It's a tricky one. And so this is, again, I think this is something that changes over time. So there's some very high level ones. Customer service is really easy to measure in the terms of, like, how many conversations are we resolving? How quickly do we resolve them? And how satisfied are people with those
But it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think those ones are important. Everyone's going to measure those. But I think if you want to go beyond that, or you want to think about what's useful for my particular company or my team, there's a few things to think about. One, why are you reporting? Like, you're probably not reporting just so that you can produce nice graphs. Like, you're probably trying to actually do something. So it might be, hey, I'm reporting to my boss so that I can show that we need more support staff. And so in that case, the metrics that I might want to do are around, the volume of conversations that each person is having, and the trend is going upwards over time. And maybe that's attached to the satisfaction level dropping, the busier these people get. So that might be a different kind of approach to reporting than person who's trying to say, I think we can add another channel here because we've got a bit of capacity. So that might be looking at first response time and a combination of that and customer satisfaction. So why you're reporting is one thing. Thinking about who the reports are for, like, are they for your team? In which case they probably want all the details, the specifics of who's ranking where and who's being more effective. If it's for upper level management, maybe it needs to be something a bit broader or higher, or more of a story approach. And then a good metric, it's something, I guess, that you want to be able to add meaning to. So a good metric for me, it has meaning, like it's tied to something that the company is trying to actually do. Like, we want to be a really responsive company. We can measure those kinds of things. It should be something you can actually change. So it's nothing more frustrating than a metric measuring something that you have no impact on. Like, if we're just measuring the amount of incoming support, really that's a problem relating to the product more so than the customer service team. And so if we can't change that as a team, that's going to be frustrating. It should be, it should be contextualized so that the number has a meaning attached to something that's actually a real issue for the company, and it should be something that's consistent over time so that you can go back and look at, a year ago we were here and now we're at this point, and that is actually, that trend is a meaningful piece of information.
Mm-hmm. And if you could name a couple of metrics that were most important for you.
So for me, thinking about HelpScout and the customer service team here, I think we're definitely looking at how quickly we get back to people. So kind of, that first response time is really important. I think it creates a great impression if you can get back quickly. Obviously, the customer satisfaction with the responses. So if we've got a combination of great first response time and we've got high levels of satisfaction, then we're on track, and we don't probably need to go too far beyond that. But the next big one, I think, maybe is I'm not sure what people call this, but I think of it like a contact rate. So out of all the customers that we have, what percentage of them actually need to contact support in a given month? I think if you look at that number and you start to see that go up, then you know that you've got a bit of an issue somewhere in the business, which maybe is not the customer service team's issue, but is going to have an impact on them. So that's a good one to keep an eye on, the customer contact rate. Obviously, there is endless ones that you can get into, but that's when I think me telling you what my ones are, like, I think you've got to think about, for the listeners of this podcast, go back and figure out, like, what do I actually care about on my team? What are we trying to change? What impact are we trying to have as a team? And then figure out what can we measure that will be a good proxy for that. Because you could go and measure a whole bunch of things. If you measure too much stuff, you just end up not focusing anywhere. So I think figure out for yourself. And I've got an article on this on HelpScout, which people can check out, kind of talking about 5 different SaaS teams like Basecamp and MailChimp and how they approach metrics and reporting, and they probably came up with a different set of metrics, each of them at different stages.
All right, it makes sense. A lot of sense. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Business Sidekick.
That's it for today. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope that you've liked this interview. And since it's the end of the year, I'd like to thank you for listening to this podcast. It's been a busy year. I started this podcast in March, and now by the end of the year, I have published 20 episodes with awesome guests. So yeah, I'm happy. And I promise to make it even better in 2017. And thanks a lot for listening. As I said, everything I do it for you. Visit our website livechatting.com/podcast or iTunes or SoundCloud or YouTube and hit subscribe button to be up to date with new episodes of Business Sidekick. All the best in 2017. Take care.
This podcast was brought to you by LiveChat.